Welcome to Everything CPA and Private Equity, where we unpack the evolving relationship between accounting firms, private equity, and other strategics. I'm David Wolfskehl, a partner at Whitman Transition Advisors.
And I'm Phil Whitman, CEO of Whitman Transition Advisors. And we've chatted with more than 150 private equity groups. We've actually closed over 40 transactions with those private equity groups. And we're bringing you firsthand insights from the front lines.
And whether you're exploring your first deal, putting your toe in the water, refining your strategy, we're here to guide you with real stories, expert advice, actionable takeaways. Let's dive in. Welcome everybody to another episode of Everything CPA and Private Equity. And before we get started today, I just want to give a big thumbs up to my partner Phil, who, although this won't be released today, was announced as a top 100 influencer in the accounting space. I think well-deserved. Also on our team is Terry Putney. I think this is his 13th or 14th year on that list. So awesome job, Phil, and congratulations and well-deserved.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Yeah, it really is an honor to be, for me, 3 years running now, 22, 23, 24. Obviously, our partner Terry, as you said, has been on that list for 13 years, and kudos to him. Also very, very well deserved. And it's kind of exciting to, as an organization, to have, two top 100 influencers in 2022, when Joel Sinkin was still working with us. We had 3 people on that list. And I think it's testamentary to the type of talent that we have on our team of now 40 individuals, and clearly making us this largest advisory organization for CPA firms in the nation, and all passionate about helping firms.
And so let's talk about the largest state in the nation, California. Just had John on a podcast to talk about P and CPAs and fits. Not sure if it was a podcast or webinar, but they just had you on. And again, one of our goals here is just to spread knowledge and to spread information. So Phil, why don't you share a little bit about, what you talked about with the California State Society?
Yeah, so that was sort of wonderful. That was hosted for what they call their elite group. And apparently out of their 40,000 members, there are 300 firms that are part of their elite group, or 300 of the members, that they're entitled to attend on a quarterly basis, what they call the CEO chat. So I was the guest on that CEO chat. It was the second time they did it. The first time they did it last quarter, they had Dan Hood, the managing editor of Accounting Today on. And Dan was actually the one that suggested to them, oh, you should chat with Phil Whitman. So number one, it was great being referred by Dan. And number two, it was great being the number 2. But, we had a real lively conversation for about an hour. And I think one of the biggest things was they asked me, just from a very high level, looking at the profession, there's been so many changes over the past couple years with the influx of new technology. But even more than that, the fact that, private equity and other strategic investors have come in and are really, really changing things up. Now, when I say really, really changing things up, David, if we look back historically, last year, we probably had 20 deals that were traditional CPA firm to CPA firm deals, and we probably had 6 that were private equity or other strategic investors. Now, this year, it's been a 180-degree reversal of that, where we probably have 30 private equity and other strategic investor deals already closed, and hopefully another 5 or 10 before, the New Year's ball drops. But, what I can say is it certainly has changed the mindset of the CPA, and I'm going to use the term seller, but it's really not selling. when you do a transaction with PE, you are really having a new partner invest in your firm. And I think it's so important, and this is one of the things we chatted about, how you say it. And this is for all the PE groups out there as well as the CPA firms. How you say what you say can mean a world of a difference. Just real quick example. One firm that we work with, a $10 million firm, he sort of ironed out the deals of a transaction with a wealth management group. And then the wealth management, the leader of that group, not a client of ours, wasn't someone we referred to him, said to this managing partner, "So how are you going to feel working for me now?" Believe it or not, that one sentence blew up that deal, because he was like, "I'm not working for you. I'd like to think as partners, I'm working with you." So for versus with, acquire versus invest. So the words are very important.
I remember one of the first meetings when we first got together I had with Glenn Friedman and Prager Metis. And it was like $1 million firm. And I said, yeah, they're looking to acquire. And after the meeting, Glenn said, we don't acquire anybody. And I learned that lesson very early, and that's a very powerful lesson. And, Phil, I think, people react to change, right? So I think some of those firms that were traditional in 2022 have now no longer are traditional. So why don't you speak to that a little bit? How?
Yeah. So when we look at, the traditional firm, the traditional model, it was always like, come join our firm and we're going to do a back-ended deal and you'll get paid out, at a point in time when you retire. And if there were firms that were actually valuing the CPA firm, if it was a $10 million firm, they might say, oh, and we're going to give you $10 million of equity, but there was no cash that was exchanged. There was nothing up front. And absolutely, there was no such thing as EBITDA. Okay. And when I have initial calls with private equity and a CPA firm, let's say one that's not educated, and usually we try and educate them before they get in the room with the private equity groups. But what private equity does is they actually create EBITDA. And the simplest example I could give is, David, you're a partner in a CPA firm, you're making $1 million a year, and private equity comes in and they say, well, we probably could find a partner to do the work that you do, and we'd probably have to pay him $350,000 or $400,000. So let's use $400,000. So David, the way we're looking at your $1 million, $400,000 of it is your compensation. The other $600,000 are profits because you're an owner of the firm. And then private equity says, Mr. David, Mr. Partner, how much of that $600,000 of profits are you willing to forego or leave behind? Hence the term leave behind EBITDA. Or some people will say this is the scrape. And I say, think of a scrape. You fall and you scrape your knee and it's kind of painful. Well, here the scrape is, you know what? You got $600,000 of profit, and the scrape is going to be, you still need $200,000 of that, so that in total you're going to be making $600,000. And then there's $400,000 of scrape or leave behind EBITDA. And that's what a multiple is going to be applied to.
I went to a dinner and I was talking to somebody, and she was asking me, so what's the multiple? What's the multiple? And I told her for her size firm, what we're seeing in the marketplace, which changes. And then she asked another question. So how do I figure out how they multiply that multiple on, right? And I think sometimes people get focused on the multiple, but they don't know how to create the number that gets multiplied by that. So how can you figure out what your firm is worth?
Yeah, and then the other thing, when you look, there's so many PE groups out there and so many strategic investors, and they all come up with it in a different way, somewhat similar, but a different way. But more importantly, you can't just say, oh, I'm getting a 7 multiple. Because are you getting a 7 multiple and they're taking over, your WIP and your AR? Or do you get to keep the balance sheet? You know, so a 7 multiple isn't a 7 multiple, isn't a 7 multiple, depending upon the different factors that this private equity group or multiple private equity groups are going to put forth. And they're all very different.
And I remember when I used to talk to people about wealth management, they would always start with what's the split. And I always said, that's the wrong question to start. You should say, who can help me maximize what we're doing, right? And I think with private equity, it's not only what the multiple is, it's the 20 other things that impact those multiples. So, Phil, what else did you share on the California State Society? What other things were interesting to those participants?
So, obviously, one question that almost always comes up is this good for the younger folks, the younger partners, and the up and comers in the firm? Yeah, it always comes up. And we're actually working with a firm where there's 4 partners that, let's call it the older group, the equity partners, and 4 non-equity partners. And you know what? For years, as those non-equity partners were brought up in the firm, they were told one day this is going to be yours, one day this is going to be yours. And you know what? A senior partner earns a lot more compensation than a non-equity or income partner. And some of those younger folks are thinking, oh, one day it's going to be my turn. When those older guys retire, I'm going to earn the big bucks. And believe it or not, there are some firms out there that have said to those younger guys, the industry is changing and we're exploring. And the reality is, okay, if you're one of those younger folks, imagine this. Private equity comes in and they put a lot of cash on the table. They invest in the firm to the tune of 60% of the equity. The senior partners, they get a check. You know what that means? That means you don't have to write them a check. You're relieved of an obligation to buy out these 4 partners. That's a lot of money. And I know you're going to say, well, that would come from the current earnings of the firms, but that means you're going to earn less than you potentially should be earning. And now, so number 1, you don't have to pay off the older partners. Number 2, you as an income partner, you're also getting a check when the transaction closes. And you know what? The private equity groups want to ensure that 40% rollover equity, that the lion's share of that ends up in the hands of the younger partner group and the up and comers. What that means is 3 to 5 years, there's a turn, and a turn means, a new group comes in and makes an investment. The original private equity group either sells all or a percentage of their holdings to someone else that's now going to be sort of your new partner. And obviously they're going to consider you. They're not just going to say, oh, we're doing a deal with Joe Blow and force it down your throat. Number 1, they're going to sit on your board. Number 2, you're going to continue running your firm. So for those younger partners, now you don't got to pay the older partners. You got a check at closing, and now there's the first turn, and you're entitled to sell 25% of whatever your rollover equity is. Now you got another bite at the apple. And imagine this, you're 40 years old or 36 years old, and you have a 20 to 25 year runway. You have an opportunity to take chips off the table every 3 to 5 or 6 years. And instead of just waiting until, okay, I'm 65 years old and now I'm going to get a payout over 10 years, I mean, think about your life cycle. You're either married or you're not. You either have children or you don't. You either bought a house or you didn't buy a house. But imagine this. Imagine you have none of that yet. You know, all of a sudden you got a check. All right. You got a girlfriend. You get married. 5 years later, you get a check. You got more money. You can put a down payment on a house.
Or
10
start
years
building
later,
wealth.
building wealth, right? You got kids that you got to put through college. Are you doing it on a pay-as-you-go system? You know, are your kids taking out significant notes and loans to do it? Or have there been bites along the way that enable you not only to plan for a very wealthy retirement, but for all these life events that occur? How wonderful would it be to take chips off the table multiple times over the course of your career instead of we're working, we're earning, working, earning, working, earning. I'm 65 now. I'm going to get 200,000 a year paid out over 10 years.
Yeah.
And multiples were one times gross revenue if you were a great firm. That's what everyone expected. We're seeing some firms get 2 to 3 times gross revenue when all is said and done. It
And,
is.
and one thing I want to make clear, when Phil's talking about when all is said and done, we see these LOIs. We're doing these deals. These aren't hypothetical. These are things that we're involved with every single day. And this isn't a PE company maybe calling you directly. This is what we see. This is what we do. Sorry, Phil. So
No, that's all right. And the one thing I will say, and I will say this absolutely on every podcast episode, as long as it remains true. And at this point, there has never, never, ever been a better time to be a CPA or CPA firm. There's lots of exciting changes coming with private equity investing and partnering with CPA firms. And guess what? They're here to stay. So whether or not you're a candidate for private equity, it behooves you to learn about them because you certainly will be competing with them in the future, competing with them for talent, competing with them for clients, and they've got deep, deep pockets. So in another episode, one of the things that David and I are going to talk about, and we'll probably have Dave Kells, who's one of our senior managing directors, join us. We're going to talk about the things that you should be doing, regardless of whether or not you're going to take a private equity investment. Because if you are, those things will increase the levers and help you increase total enterprise value, which is really total enterprise value is what you get after you multiply that leave behind EBITDA times that multiple that you're getting. But even if you're not going to be taking an investment, you need to know the different things that you can do to effectively compete with those private equity backed firms.
And one thing I want to say also, because you just triggered something. So a lot of these specialty firms are also going to be impacted by private equity because they were getting their opportunities from a $5 million firm down the street, a $12 million firm down the street, and all of a sudden many of those firms are now part of bigger platforms, and they're doing those things internally. And so with this PE, if you're a specialty practice, you have some risks that some of your client base, and it could be a significant portion of your referral base, goes away. But you're also very attractive to these firms. And even though you might not be annuitized income, where you're doing the tax return or the audit every year, there is both risk for you and also great opportunities for you within some of these roll-up plays.
David, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, we're working with a litigation support company, and what they're going to do a transaction with one of these private equity groups, And they're going to be at the center of a hub and spoke model where there are going to be 15 firms that surround them that all have litigation support opportunities. And instead of it going to that outside provider, all of that business is going to be retained internally at the nucleus of that litigation support firm sitting in the center. So to David's point, if you're a specialty practice in any area, there's opportunities for you to have conversations with private equity as well, because as they build the universe of CPA firms, step number 2 is, okay, let's get some of these specialty services on board.
Yep. So, and again, as Phil was talking about, specialty services, opportunities, younger partners, opportunities, might not be the right opportunity for everybody here, but I also find a lot of people are having conversations with themselves, right? Conversations with their executive committee, right? And not necessarily taking a couple meetings just to explore. And we're very comfortable helping people take exploratory meetings or even just doing education for the executive committee to let them know what their firm might be worth and to share how the competitive landscape is changing. So this is David Wolfskehl of Whitman Transition Advisors. Very thankful for you to spend a couple of minutes with us.
David, thanks so much. And we're really excited to continue providing education, first and foremost, to not only our clients, but prospective clients and non-clients. There's so much going on out there. We're keeping a pulse on all the changes, and we're going to continue bringing them to you. Thank you for being here. Once again, I'm Phil Whitman, CEO of Whitman Transition Advisors, and truly blessed to have this opportunity to do this sharing with you. Thanks, David.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Everything CPA and Private Equity. Every episode brings fresh insight. However, there's always more to talk about.
Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you watch podcasts. Have a question or topic you'd like us to cover, we'd love for you to reach out to us.
Together, we will help you navigate this dynamic landscape so that we can help you achieve your goals. Until next time, keep making moves that matter.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.